listening in. He's live for us at UN headquarters in New York. And the UN Security Council is due to vote on a resolution calling for the suspension of hostilities in Gaza. The vote has already been delayed twice this week as diplomats have been negotiating with the United States on the wording of the resolution. Earlier this month, Washington vetoed a resolution calling for a ceasefire. They're live from the UN headquarters in New York, and it's been delayed for days, Gabe. That gives us an idea of just how contentious the wording of this resolution has been, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. And it just shows you how serious everyone is taking this resolution, given the situation and the humanitarian disaster, really, catastrophe that's playing out in Gaza right now. Things are moving very fast here at the United Nations. I'll start off by saying that. Let me just tell you initially what's going on right now. The Security Council members for the last half hour or a little bit more than that have been behind closed doors in what's called a closed session. They've been trying to hammer out some sort of agreement that the U.S. Can agree to, basically, on this draft resolution that has now been on the table for several days now. That closed-door meeting, we believe, has ended, and now we're waiting to find out if the ambassadors come back into the Security Council chambers and hold a vote or not. That is what we're waiting for literally at this very minute right now. The key here is not only the language is the key, but there's really two key parts. There's a suspension of hostilities. That was the first issue that the U.S. was kind of grappling with. Would they accept that? And the second is now this monitoring mechanism, we believe, could be a point of contention. In the draft resolution, it calls for a monitoring mechanism. Essentially, in short, what that means is it would mean empower the United Nations to facilitate the entry of aid into Gaza and then facilitate its distribution, essentially taking power away from the Israelis on that part there. So clearly the U.S. has some problems with this. And if you're asking yourself why this is important, is because the U.S. can veto this. And then it would stop any further movement on this resolution, of course. They're one of 5 countries with veto power, number one. But number two, why are these negotiations dragging on so long? The answer is, we believe, because this is so high profile, because the language is so important, because it is binding by international law. If it passes, we believe that the U.S. Ambassador to the UN is having to go to Washington, and ultimately any language would have to be signed off on by the White House. And so even if they perhaps agree to something here at the UN, meaning the U.S., to a draft, they've then got to go to Washington, we believe, to get sign off at the very highest of levels. And that clearly takes some time. But it also shows you how important every little word is in this resolution. And lastly, I'll say, this resolution has overwhelming support. We do think that it would pass with the 9 votes needed. Again, it now comes down to the United States. Would they abstain and let this go forward, or would they veto it? That's the big question.
And Gabe, we are hearing from the United Nations that the Security Council, that vote has been delayed to Thursday. It was supposed to take place on Monday. It is. So we have been listening there to the United Arab Emirates ambassador to the United Nations Security Council, Lara Nusseibeh, and she was speaking about that UN Security Council resolution that we have been expecting a vote on since Monday, and we have just heard that it's been delayed to Thursday now. She spoke of the backlog of humanitarian aid that's unable to reach people in Gaza. This resolution is calling for a suspension of hostilities in Gaza and also on speeding up and expanding humanitarian assistance into Gaza. Let's bring our correspondent Gabriel Elizondo back in. He's been